What's up, everybody? Welcome into this Wednesday edition of Pushing the Pile. It is officially April, which means it's draft month here at Pushing the Pile, which means we're talking draft prospects. And we're going to go through today's show and do guys we think are the biggest risers and fallers throughout this pre-draft process. And obviously, this is subjective to a degree. A lot of rising and falling is just people realizing how good someone is or someone realizing how overrated someone was in the first place. It's not a real they did something, but for a lot of these guys, actually, whether it's between their performances at all-star games, their performances in their pre-draft testing or lack thereof, that it's actually real that they have risen or they have fallen. So we're going to start with offense. We're going to go through position by position, give a guy for each, and we'll start positive. We'll start with our riser. So JP, who is your biggest riser at quarterback through this pre-draft process?
For me, the biggest riser has been Garrett Nussmeier, and I think it's partially been because he's actually fully healthy now, and he has said that he was playing this entire 2025 season with an injury that was suffered 2 days into camp. But I also think Nussmeier is a winner because he's shown that he can throw with timing, with anticipation, and I think that stuff is on the 2024 tape for Nussmeier. I mean, if we remember going into the 2025 season, he was seen as a first-round pick. He was seen as a guy who could be a bona fide starting quarterback in the NFL. I do think that's relatively cooled off, and I think for good reason. I don't think that he's going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, but I do think he, in a quarterback draft class that has one surefire starter and everybody else is a lot of question marks, he's starting to play himself back up into if we're in the third round and we on a guy who we know can spot start a game, I think Nussmeier can be one of those guys.
I'm right there with you. I think he feels like a guy, I've been saying like a Mac Jones, where, hey, he gets to the right spot, you get some talent around him, I think it'll work out. And, the ab injury that he was dealing with this season could easily be a very convenient excuse, but I tend to believe that he had it just because his arm strength, truly how much velocity he could put on the ball, was worse this year than it was last year. That's not usually how it goes. And it looked better by the time he got to the Senior Bowl. So between Senior Bowl performance, obviously his testing and his weight is not good, right? He didn't do any athletic testing, but he is a smallerly built quarterback. That's never going to be good. But performance-wise, he was the best guy at the Senior Bowl. And you could still see a path to success for him. I think he'll end up a day 2 pick. Not a lot of day 2 quarterbacks in this class, but I bet with this pre-draft process, he ends up a day 2 pick. My guy quarterback, I'm going to go with another guy who I think could sneak into day 2. I actually just saw this week that this guy, Cole Payton, the North Dakota State quarterback, he's in the 60s on Todd McShay's board. I think a lot of people are coming around to seeing how intriguing he could be as an athlete, because at the NFL Combine, after Taylor Green, who obviously, freak show, best all-time combine ever at the quarterback position, this guy had put up great numbers at 6'3", 232. So really good size for the position. He ran a 4.56. He had a 40-inch vertical, a 10-10 broad jump. Truly special numbers. I thought he interviewed exceptionally well. And I think on air at the Senior Bowl, he looked the best, actually. His arm, his accuracy, when it was just him throwing routes to receivers, tight ends, that sort of thing, he was awesome. Now, in the actual on-field game, he took a pretty big backseat to Garrett Nussmeier. Nussmeier looked quite a bit better in that. But I think the ability to be a good athlete with a NFL caliber arm strength who is accurate, I think all those things, when you factor in the fact that he has 1 year in a run-heavy offense is all you have, he's at least intriguing from a developmental perspective of what his tools could be.
And I think that's what we're looking at when you come to developmental prospects. You have to have the requisite athleticism to be developed.
Yes.
We can't sit here and say this guy's going to be a developmental prospect and there's nothing athletically to develop. For Cole Payton, I do think that he has those athletic tools to be hey, we're going to sit you for a couple of years, see what happens, because he is a very good runner, and that shows up on North Dakota State's tape. They use him a lot in the QB run game. He can scramble. He can create outside the pocket. And when I watched him at Senior Bowl, the thing that I love the most about him was in that environment, a lot of quarterbacks tend to play it safe. They're going for the check downs. They're going to try and find the most sure thing when it comes to completion percentages. Cole Payton was not doing that. He is going to try and test you vertically. He's going to throw the ball downfield. And I like that confidence. I like that I like the ballsiness by Cole Payton to actually like try and throw the football downfield. That's something that I respect a lot when it comes to quarterbacks in all-star game environments. And he does have the arm strength, I think, to at least be like NFL average. But when you're talking about a guy who, like you said, is big, runs fast for a quarterback, and can be added on the run game after 1 year of starting, I don't see why he couldn't be a developmental guy, maybe around day 3 instead of day 2. But with this quarterback class, I mean, who really knows?
Let's put some numbers to it. 12.3 yard average depth of target at North Dakota State. And 35 of his 161 completions came 20 plus yards downfield. So that's over a fifth of his completions were deep balls last year. Pretty nuts stuff there from Cole Payton. All right, running back position. I already know you're going. I know it so much that I actually filled it out for you on the sheet we're playing.
You know me too well. It's Mike Washington Jr. from Arkansas. And this is a guy I watched after the Senior Bowl because he had a really good Senior Bowl. And I'm like, where have we been on this guy? Where has this guy been? He transferred up multiple times to Arkansas from New Mexico State. And when you watch him play, I think the thing that stood out the most was he's a high cut runner. It's very similar to like how DeMarco Murray ran tall. I'm not saying that he is DeMarco Murray as a runner, but they are both tall guys, big, really well built. But he's won this process by running fast. He ran a 4.3. He ran 4.3s at the combine, 4.33, 39-inch vertical jump, 128-inch broad jump. All of those are in the 90th percentile or better for a 6'1", 223-pound running back. And I think where he actually shows a lot of promise is as a pure runner when it comes to creating, when it comes to getting to the second level and being an explosive running back. I do think there are a lot of issues when it comes to pass protection and when it comes to the receiving game. But I think for a guy, like we said, like a developmental prospect, I think like a day 2 guy, I think that'd be a really fun like compliment to a running back who kind of has more juice in the passing game. Initially, I was sort of like, what about the Lions? Like the Lions feel like they could be a team where Mike Washington Jr. fits really well next to Jahmyr Gibbs because he has that size, speed element that a lot of teams are looking for.
One more issue I'll say with him. He had 7 fumbles the last 2 years on 321 attempts. That's like the biggest thing that'll get you to not see the field at the next level. So a little bit concerning. Interestingly enough, though, the guy I'm going with was his teammate in 2024, which is an insane thing. 2 of the top 5 running backs in this class could have both been at New Mexico State in 2024. And it's Seth McGowan, who was the Kentucky back last year. His production at Kentucky will not turn heads. 730 yards, 4.4 yards per carry, but he did score 12 touchdowns. And that's what I like him as. He runs hard as can be. He could be a goal line short yardage back at 6 foot 223. And his numbers, 4.49, 42.5-inch vertical, 10.11 broad jump for a guy that size with those numbers and to have the physicality that he runs with. He could come off the board as top 5 back. Now, he spent 3 months in jail after starting his career at Oklahoma in 2021 for felony robbery over what sounded like it was a drug deal gone awry. That being said, that caveat, the guy's talented, man. It is obvious on his tape. So a wild turn of events here that North Dakota State could have been RBU in 2024, and nobody knew.
Seth McGowan is a guy where you watch him, you know exactly what you're going to get. He gets upfield. It's the old like Frank Gore adage, like if you need 3 yards, he's going to get you 3 yards. If you need 5 yards, he's going to get you 3 yards. Yeah. I think McGowan is a guy where he knows where he wins and he gets upfield in a hurry. And I think those explosive numbers sort of back up like on the goal line. Like you said, 12 touchdowns. He's hard to bring down in those goal-to-go situations. He runs low. He runs really strong. He's got really strong legs. But I do think there are a lot of questions that are going to have to be asked for him, especially production-wise. I think he's going to production and off-field. But, you know, when you talk about like another example would be like Ollie Gordon from last year. I think he's faster, a little more explosive than Ollie Gordon was in his final season at Oklahoma State. But for the purpose that he served on the Dolphins with short yardage, goal line, just a bigger thumper of a back. I think Seth McGowan can do that at the NFL level.
All right, let's move on to wide receiver. Who we got?
I got Oklahoma, former Purdue and Oklahoma receiver Deion Burks. And it's funny because Deion Burks didn't actually I don't think he actually ran any drills at the combine. He just showed up and was like, all right, I'm just going to do everything else well. He's like 5'9, 180, but I guarantee you like 175 of that 180 is pure muscle. Like, dude's got huge legs and he's super explosive. And that shows up with the testing. He ran a 4.3 in the 40, 42 and a half broad vertical jump, 131-inch broad jump. Also put up 26 reps on the bench press. The dude is like a physical juggernaut. And so when you go back and watch him play, you're expecting that juice, that speed. That shows up. He runs his routes with a sense of urgency. The only issue is he's had some of the worst quarterback play between Purdue and the John Mateer experience that I think I've ever seen for a receiver prospect, where like he's getting open and just the QB sails him, or he's right there. He sort of had the sacrificial X routes in Oklahoma's offense, and Oklahoma's opponents would roll their coverage to Deion Burks to take away that explosive aspect. I do think he profiles more as a slot at the next level. I think there's a lot of similarities to Marvin Mims, who also came out of Oklahoma when it comes to that explosive aspect and what he can add as a return man. But I think the dude's going to be a lot better than he actually was in college, just because NFL quarterbacks will be better than the quarterbacks that he had at Purdue and Oklahoma.
I think the inability to hit him, yes, it was a quarterback problem, but I think that's also maybe his biggest worry is that he's small and small framed. If you go and look, 70 3/4 inch wingspan for him. Look at wide receivers with that wingspan or under. Khalil Shakir, Wan'Dale Robinson are your success stories. Some guys who haven't quite worked out. Jacob Cowing, Rondale Moore, Tutu Atwell. It's hard to find a big role in an offense when you have that limited a catch radius, but man has juice. And I don't think he's going to be 1,000-yard receiver anytime in his career, but he very easily could be a guy who's averaging 20+ yards per catch and a weapon in that regard for you. All right, my guy is wide receiver Jeremy Bernard out of Alabama via Washington. I think there was big questions about what kind of athlete he was. And I still do worry about him being able to win vertically in the NFL. But he ran a 4.48. And what I love is he had a 6.71 3-cone time at 206 pounds. And I think that's where he wins, is just being very gifted change of direction athlete. You see it on dig routes. You see it on comebacks. You see it after the catch with him. I think he's one of the highest floor receivers after the top group of guys in this class. And I fully expect him to be a second rounder after his pre-draft process, just because I think he has a really high floor and a really translatable NFL game, even if, I don't see him being a 1,500-yard receiver ever in his career.
Jeremy Bernard is, so I call a lot of receivers on social media, I call them emotional support wide receiver threes. Like he's not going to set the world on fire, but when you need 8 yards on 3rd and 7, you're going to go to your emotional support wide receiver three. Parker Washington was this for the Jaguars last year.
Yes.
Jeremy Bernard is like the NFL draft's perfect emotional support wide receiver 3. I don't think he'll ever profile as a major role player or a major star in a passing game, but he does all the dirty work really well. Like you said, he makes tough catches over the middle. He creates separation on comebacks, dig routes. And I think with Alabama, they used him in a lot of ways as a runner. They got him designed like run game reps. He blocks his ass off. Like, that's one of my favorite parts about him. He's going to put his body on the line in the run game. So I think that just incredibly useful player, along with running a 4.48 and having a 6.71 3-cone at that size. I mean, when you look at like guys who have worked in the NFL, I think like Robert Woods is sort of like the perfect example of what Jeremy Bernard can be at the NFL level, of just a productive and useful player for a long time in an NFL offense.
All right, let's get to the tight end position, where it was an athletic tight end class. A lot to choose from here. Who are you choosing, though?
I'm choosing one of my guys, Georgia tight end Oscar Delp. And initially, I was really worried because he didn't run at the combine because he had I believe it was a fracture in his foot. And then he runs at his pro day. And according to scouts there, he runs a 4.48 at the pro day. And we are so back. Like, that was the only number I needed. Like 4.48 at the pro day. He was explosive. And when you watch him at Georgia, it is the most, like, I said with Deion Burks, he had some of the worst quarterback play of a prospect this year. Oscar Delp is open and just never gets the ball. Like, it's the worst designed offense for any offensive prospect not named Zachariah Branch in the draft class this year.
I honestly even think it was bad for Zachariah Branch, though. Like, no one needs that many screens.
Well, you're at least getting volume.
Yeah.
It's just volume targets. You are it's like when you're the best player on a bad basketball team, you're getting like 40 shots a game.
Yeah,
like,
you're averaging 40% from the field, but you're 30 plus a game.
Yeah, you're like Brooklyn Nets Cam Thomas. Like that's what we're looking at with Zachariah Branch. But Oscar Delp, it just, with this tight end class and with tight ends overall, it's leaning more towards athletic profile than production. And there's just not a lot of production for Oscar Delp. But when you watch him play, he's one of the few tight ends in this draft class who can win as an inline blocker and also create problems for defenses as a receiver, because he is so straight line fast. He wins on overs, go routes, crossers, because it's impossible for linebackers to keep up with him. And I think there is some nuance needed with his route running. I think there's a little bit more. I think there's potential for him to have some more wiggle in his route running, but he didn't really have a lot of routes to run at Georgia because they used him as much as a pass protector. I mean, there are reps that he had against Joshua Josephs, who's a prospect out of Tennessee in pass protection, where I'm like, oh, this guy looks like a tackle as well. So I think when you're able to do all that and have the athletic profile of Oscar Delp, he's going to be a guy that goes a lot higher than people think.
And to all the people who see a pro day 40 and they're like, okay, yeah, sure, it's pro day 40. 38-inch vertical, 10.5 broad jump to go along with that, which, even if it's a 4.6, those are awesome numbers for a tight end. And I mean, I always thought he was kind of a tightly built tight end. 6'5" wingspan's not terrible for a guy who was a really good blocker at Georgia. So I think he very easily could end up a top 100 pick in this class. Probably should at this point in time. All right, my guy, it's Eli Stowers. Still very much a wide receiver, but I love the fact that 3 years ago, Texas A&M, he was a quarterback and he was listed at 215 pounds. Fast forward to the combine, he's 239 and he has a 45.5-inch vertical, ties the combine record. Stupid stuff, 4.5, 140. I mean, so he's 239 and obviously still ways to go as a blocker, but even if you just put on 15 pounds of fat, he's still probably running like a 4.6 and still probably jumping really high. Now, obviously, it's not maybe super beneficial, but the improvements he's made in such a short period of time, I think this guy ends up a second-round pick after this pre-draft process, just because there's a strong track record of the converted quarterback to tight end who ends up becoming productive. I mean, Travis Kelce was that at Cincinnati. Now, it was to a lesser degree, like earlier on in his career, but there's something to that speaks to innate just coordination that I think he'll figure it out, and would surprise me if he's not tight end 2 off the board at this point in time.
The thing that impresses me the most about Eli Stowers is he makes a lot of catches outside of his frame. And again, you just talked about a guy who was a quarterback before he transitioned to tight end. And when you think about those guys, you're not thinking about like sacrifice plays, like dirty work. Like, he's going over the middle. He's making a lot of tough catches outside of his frame and adjusting his body really well to the ball. And he's also creating after the catch. I don't think he's like the most explosive guy after the catch. He doesn't have a lot of wiggle there, but sometimes when you watch him play, it's just like, that's not a tight end. Like that's a receiver. And the biggest thing that stands out for him when it comes to improvement is just he cannot block right now. He tries. And that's the biggest thing with tight ends. And we're going to get to a tight end in fallers that there's a difference. But I would rather draft a guy who can't block but wants to, rather than a guy that can't block and doesn't want to block. because I can teach blocking, especially for a guy who was a quarterback a couple of years ago. So I think Stowers is a guy who's going to get drafted early. I think he's going to get drafted on day 2, like you said. It might take a couple years, but I do think there is a role for him in the NFL, especially as the passing game continues to, especially as we get more into 12 and 13 personnel, because the more bodies you can put on the field, the more you have to respect them.
Let's get to offensive line, and then we'll cash out our risers and switch on to fallers. Who is the biggest riser for you?
Mine is offensive guard from Texas A&M, Chase Bizantis. He is a guy that I thought was going to be a second rounder going into the pre-draft cycle, but watching him play, then watching his work at the combine, it just feels like he's the type of guy that goes in the back end of round 1 that nobody expects until you watch him play and it's like, oh yeah, I get it. Like, he is one of the most rock solid pass protectors at the guard spot in this year's draft class. He is a pure left guard, and that I think that's going to stand out to a lot of teams, because there's so many guys that are more like, this guy's a tackle but could move the guard, or this guy's a guard that could be a center, or this guy's a tackle that could be a center. No, this guy has a defined position. He has really strong hands when he gets his hands on you. But where I like him the most is that when he refits his hands, he's really smart when it comes to getting his hands inside the chest of defensive tackles. And I think that's what makes him so good as a pass protector in this guard class. And where I do think he does sort of lose attachment in the run game, I think for teams that just want to solidify their pass protection towards the back end of round 1. Initially, I thought of the Seahawks and their Anthony Bradford problem. Like, if you put Chase Bizantis at right guard, you have Gray Zabel at left guard, and both your tackles are locked in. Like, that's a really nice formula for success. So I'm a big fan of Bizantis, and I think he's had a really, really good postseason, like, pre-draft process.
Yeah, I think he is. So we got Vega Ioane 1. He's my second true guard on my board here. I will not forgive him, though, for the missed holding call against Notre Dame at the end. It was a hold. It was a hold. It was a hold on Bizantis. It was. He had 8 penalties this year. He should have had 9. He should have had 9. All right, my guy. It is Monroe Freeling from Georgia, the second best RAS, according to StatsBomb, ever for an offensive tackle. I mean, he lit up the combine. And I think the biggest thing with him, in a class full of, are they a tackle, aren't they a tackle, are these guys guards? He is 6'7" with almost 35-inch arms. He is a tackle every day of the week, and he's a highly athletic tackle who got better on tape. So I think, given all those things, I'd be surprised if he's not a top half of round 1 offensive tackle when it's all said and done.
With offensive tackles, I think I'm leaning more towards, like, what other sports did you play growing up? Because you could tell Monroe Freeling played basketball. You watch his footwork. He played basketball. They talked ad nauseum during the combine about how his mom was a yoga instructor. You can tell in the flexibility that he has that sort of that background. And I think that's the thing that stands out the most when you watch him, is in those games where he constantly improved this season. His best games were at the end of the season against Alabama in the SEC championship game, against Ole Miss in the playoff. He constantly got better, and you can tell with that athleticism, the footwork, the length, and like you said, he is a true left tackle. There are no questions about it. And while I think there is some times where he gets a little too wide and he looks like a baby deer, but the size, the athleticism, the movement skills, and what he did at the combine, I don't think there's a reason why he shouldn't be the first, like, offensive tackle off the board when it comes to, like, pure tackle.
I'm not quite there yet with him, especially just because I see some of these guys as tackles still, but it would not surprise me. It definitely would not surprise me if he does end up being that. All right. We're going to take a quick break. After that, we got to focus on some fallers. We're not going to kill them too hard, but some guys didn't have the best pre-draft process. We're going to point it out, and then we're going to move on. All right, coming up after this.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ hits every highlight from all the sports that matter to you.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, streaming free 24/7.
All right, who is your faller at the quarterback position?
It's unfortunately Ty Simpson, and I think it's for a lot of reasons that sort of aren't in his control, but also like I think I think with the quarterback spot in general, I think Simpson is a guy where it's going to take a little bit more projection, a little bit more growth for him to become a starting quarterback, and I just don't think that that's a first round guy. And I think we looked at him early in the season. It's like, oh, this guy could legitimately be a first round player. But when you look at the injuries and the major drop in accuracy, ball placement to finish up the season, it's really tough to sort of sell yourself on a 6'1" slider frame quarterback who had a lot of injuries in his one season as a starter that drastically affected his accuracy. I do think he's a tough quarterback. He's a tough kid, and he's gonna create. He's gonna try and create. He's gonna try and scramble around when he needs to. And I think he can throw the ball over the middle a little bit with confidence. And I feel like with that, you're sort of like, oh, well, he could be Brock Purdy, but I think within that, you're sort of examining like why Brock Purdy became Brock Purdy and what was needed to make Brock Purdy become that. So I think Simpson's a guy who's starting to fall, and I'm sort of the belief that the gap between Mendoza and Simpson is wider than the gap between Simpson and everybody else.
Ooh. I have an article up on CBSSports.com breaking down actually the strengths and weaknesses of Mendoza and Ty Simpson. I want to go and check it out. I do think the one thing being undersold about Ty Simpson, he actually has a good arm. I think he has a stronger arm than he's being credited for. I'd say it's as good, if not better than Mendoza. I think it's definitely better when he's on the move. But I am terrified of the fact that he was so bad down the stretch. And you can make excuse for the injuries, but like he's small. And how many small quarterbacks have been able to stay healthy, and just guys that size, it just gets more difficult to play the position once you get to the NFL. So that's my biggest worry for him. And speaking of small, Kate Klubnik is my guy. He goes to his pro day and he's 207 pounds. 207 pounds. Like chug some water. And that's like knowing his agent knows that's light, knew he had to gain weight. Like he's probably 200 realistically. If you go to your pro day and only clock in at that, and then he runs a 4.7, 33.5-inch vertical, a guy who's supposed to be like maybe one of his biggest selling points is his athleticism. Now I thought he threw fine at the Shrine Bowl, but that's tough sell for a guy who, again, a developmental prospect. You don't want a developmental guy who's 207 pounds, who has pretty average tools. So I think that's my biggest worry with him going forward.
For me, outside of those worries with Klubnik, he falls apart under pressure. And I think
it's because of that. Like those are not incongruous things, as being small and falling apart under pressure.
Yeah, I think it goes hand in hand. I think a large part of it is because of all the hits he took behind a subpar at times Clemson offensive line and a subpar like process for Clemson offensively. But it's really hard to undo scar tissue under pressure for a quarterback going from college to the NFL. I mean, Kenny Pickett got hit a lot in his final few seasons at Pitt, and then you could see him at Pitt with Steelers and everywhere that he's been since. He just falls apart under pressure, and that's sort of where you worry with Klubnik is how many hits he's taken and how many shots he's taken. He's taken some wicked shots in his college career. Is that going to affect him at the NFL level? Because if you're scared of standing in there under pressure, you cannot play on an NFL football field. With everything flying around you, it's really hard to, like you said, sell yourself on developmental prospect who doesn't have the tools that you want to develop and also is going to fall apart under pressure. So you can't really play him as like a spot starter.
Let's get to running back, where I was on Establish the Runs podcast, breaking down the running back class. And I think I counted up 12 guys from last year's class that I would legitimately have ranked higher than my RB3 in this year's class. It's sparse pickings. And there's some guys we thought could have been better prospects who really didn't show up to the plate. One of them is your guy here.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's Nick Singleton from Penn State. And I was super high on Nick Singleton going into this season. I thought that, like, the biggest selling point for him is the athleticism. He is a legitimate track athlete at 6'1", 220 pounds. Like, he has the size, speed that you look for in starting running backs. But then you watch him play, and it's just he does not know how to use his size and speed and athleticism. His vision, he's running into people all the time. And that's not something that you want from your running backs. He's constantly running into the backs of his offensive linemen. And for him, the selling point was going to be athleticism. But at Senior Bowl, he broke his foot and couldn't test at the combine. So that just sort of knocks down his athletic profile again, where like he can't actually test. So a lot of it has been sort of freak accidents, freak injury, but this past season was not great for Singleton. I think Katron Allen, his teammate, might be a better prospect at this stage, but it's tough because it feels like he's going to be a developmental running back when we thought he could have been like at least RB2 going into this season.
An interesting stat I found with Singleton and Katron Allen is that Katron Allen's usage in Penn State's offense, the difference between his and Nick Singleton's was actually bigger than the difference between Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. So Penn State was basically saying Katron Allen, the difference between him and Nick Singleton for us was bigger than the difference between Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Now, it's not like a 1-to-1. Obviously, it doesn't work like that. But like they basically just turned the keys over to Katron Allen and said, Nick, like, hey, thanks, but this ain't doing it for us this year, unfortunately. All right, my guy. It's Emmett Johnson, who very productive this past year at Nebraska, but you can be small in the NFL. You can be a mid-athlete in the NFL. You can't be small and a mid-athlete in the NFL. And unfortunately, that's what he came in at the combine. He had an RAS of 5.85. So pretty much the definition of a mid-athlete. And he's 202 pounds. Now, obviously, he's a well-built 202 pounds, but I wouldn't say he's a physical runner. I think Jadarian Price is a similar weight class guy. And when you watch him run, you never get the sense that it quite matters. Whereas Emmett Johnson, his entire play style is trying to win as an athlete. It's trying to outmaneuver guys. It's trying to make guys miss in space. And it's a running style, that's a running style that can work. You better be like a 4-4 guy and move like a James Cook does, if that's going to be how you play in the NFL, and not a 4-5-6 guy who, ancillary drills, 35.5-inch vertical, 10-foot broad jump, who are just, those are average numbers.
In a lot of ways, he sort of reminds me of Caleb Johnson coming out last year out of Iowa, where like their games are built on like vision and footwork. Like they'd be great outside zone running backs, but they both didn't test well athletically. But the biggest difference is Caleb Johnson is 20 pounds heavier than Emmett Johnson. So again, like you said, you can be small, you can be slow in the NFL. You can't be both. And Emmett Johnson is a guy where like when you watch him, it's like you want to believe because of the vision, because of the footwork. He knows ball. Like there is like if there's a ball nowhere badge for football, Emmett Johnson knows ball. He knows how to set up blocks, but it's really hard to sell yourself on a small running back who runs a 4.56. Like it's just gonna take a lot of conjecture, and there's not a lot of upside for that. And if you're choosing between like Emmett Johnson and a guy like we talked about before, Singleton, who doesn't necessarily like have the same vision or traits like Johnson, but is probably going to run 4.3s when he's healthy, like it's tough not to choose the guy who's the athlete, because you can teach that guy how to play football. You can't necessarily teach somebody how to get faster.
Yeah, that's kind of the worry of the average athlete. It's just that those things tend to be pretty sticky from college to the NFL. All right, next position, wide receiver, where there's a lot of guys to choose from. Truthfully, who are you going with?
I went with USC's Jacoby Lane, and I think he sort of gained a little bit more ground at the combine. But for a guy that I was really excited about going into the season, it just felt like he was phased out of USC's offense. Of course, with Mekhi Lemon there, like he was going to see sort of a secondary role, but his growth didn't happen in a way that I thought it would when you watch him play. With his biggest pros are he is big, he's tall, he's fast, he has good hands. He does have good hands. He's a jump ball guy. He's going to win as a jump ball guy early in his NFL career, but he can't sink his hips. He can't decelerate. Like, he can accelerate. I think he's good long speed. Like, he ran a 4.48, and I think that long speed between the 20 and 40 is really good, and that's going to help him at the NFL level, but he can't slow down. He can't stop on a dime. And if you're that big, that tall, that fast, and can't stop on a dime, I think there's a lot of comparisons that are going to be made to Keon Coleman this draft cycle, because that is the scare, or the latest scare of like big, tall, fast, but can't separate. And Lane has sort of been on the unfortunate end of that. But for a guy that was at the Senior Bowl, I also sort of wanted to see a little bit more from him there. It just feels like he's just been okay throughout this draft process. And there's been a lot of guys that have passed him up.
Yeah, the Senior Bowl was tough, and now his testing was good, and he is one of the younger receivers in this class. But I'm right there with you. I think he could fall to day 3 at this point. All right, my guy is Jordan Tyson from Arizona State, and the injury bug that has plagued him throughout his career, I think it's concerning that a hamstring injury suffered during the season that held him out of the last few games of the season caused him to also miss the pro day. Now, you could say he didn't have enough time, whatever, coming back from it, and that's what he said, and he will test prior to April, but it's like, damn, if you are so banged up consistently that you have to miss your pro day because of it, after all he's been through, I think it's just going to be hard. And then he also only came in with 30.25-inch arms, which, you can say, what does that matter? He's 6'2". He still, shows a good catch radius on tape. Well, there's not a lot of track record of true number 1 wide receivers with arms that short in the NFL. Your best case scenarios really are guys. Greg Jennings was 30-inch arms. Tyler Lockett, 30-inch arms. A lot of the more consistently big play wide receivers, they have just a little better length and a little better ability to pluck it outside the frame. So for all those reasons, I think it's a tough pre-draft process for Jordan Tyson so far.
And I also think when you watch him play, you sort of expected a little more physicality from him.
Yeah, that's his biggest weakness by far.
Yeah, he just struggles against press. And I think for all that he does when it comes to creating separation in the intermediate areas, he's explosive when he does play and is healthy, but he sort of plays a little too again, his best is he plays football like a basketball player. And sometimes it's good, but sometimes you got to get a guy off you and press, and he doesn't really do that. And you sort of hope that he wins with a little more physicality for being a 6'2", 200+ pound receiver, but that's not really his game. So you sort of worry that he's going to get bodied on the outside by bigger physical corners. And is that a guy that you can truly count on? And I mean, if you're going to compare him to, there have been a lot of comparisons. I think pro comparisons are really, really, really bad to make because it puts a lot of unfair expectations on a player. But what you said with the wingspan, the 2 comparisons that I've seen a lot for Jordan Tyson have been Justin Jefferson and Devontae Adams. Justin Jefferson had 33-inch arms. Devontae Adams had 32 5/8-inch arms. And those guys both win against physicality. They're not hesitant. They're not trying to do too much with their route running. I think he can do so much better with a simplified plan as a route runner. I think he tries to do a little too much.
Oh, yeah.
It feels very Jerry Jeudy-ish, but I do think that can be coached out of him. But how high are you going to draft a guy who struggles against physicality and also can't stay healthy?
Now, everyone is measuring short at the combine. Maybe he'll go to his pro day and he'll be 30.5, 30.75, and it won't be maybe as big a deal. But given one, it's not going to look like Devontae Adams or Justin Jefferson, right? He's just not that type of guy. His 6'3" wingspan, I think, is very indicative. He is not a lankily built wide receiver. So he's never just going to be that. And that's why he's just trying to come up with a comp for him. Jeudy is kind of the realm of wide receivers I see now. I think much better ball skills than Jeudy, different personality than Jeudy. There's reasons to believe he can succeed, but there's enough smoke here. I think some teams will pass on him if they need a wide receiver, especially when there's other options on the board. All right, tight end. We both have the same guy. I mean, a lot of tight ends tested so well that it was hard to pick one. But this guy, Yeah, this guy was obvious.
Yeah, this is Michael Trigg, tight end out of Baylor. And unfortunately, like when we talk about Eli Stowers, there is when you can't block but like show effort, it's more willing to like buy into a guy than can't block and doesn't want to block. Michael Trigg unfortunately falls into can't block and doesn't want to block. And on top of that has a 27.5-inch vertical out of pro day, which, man, if you're supposed to be the athlete at tight end spot, like you can't jump 27.5 inches. And I think he did say at his pro day, like he had messed up his hamstring running 40, and I was just like, okay. But again, if you're supposed to be the athleticism catch point guy, and there's still some like nice traits for Michael Trigg, especially when he has huge hands, long arms, like that's going to play at the NFL level, but you can't be the undersized tight end who also isn't explosive.
Dude, 27.5-inch vertical is, I mean, I remember we did vertical jump testing. We used to do like testing in high school every year. There was probably a half dozen kids that did over 27.5. I wasn't even in a big school. Like 27.5 is not for a guy whose job is to be an athlete. What that tells me, and you can put this in tandem with his unwillingness to block, is that he didn't train. Like, and even on the sheet I got, which has all the athletic test numbers, it says claimed left hamstring issue. A lot of guys there are a lot of bad hamstrings this spring, I'll say, between pro days and combines. A lot of guys had hammies and groins, I think more than usual. But this one to me just says he didn't train. Like he did not train hard enough, because the 27.5-inch vertical, like I've seen him jump higher than that on tape. Like he is not an unathletic guy. I don't think he's super explosive, but he's not unathletic. That is just embarrassing in my opinion. And with the fact that he's a 3-school guy with the reports around him, to see his pre-draft process, like, because there are things that have to be fixed. He has to improve. He's unbelievably gifted and could improve, but I don't think anyone's taking that chance after this until late day 3, probably. All right, offensive line. Hard to find one here. I think a lot of the offensive linemen tested well. Not a lot of duds in the offensive line class. Who are you going with, though?
I went with Iowa's Jennings Dunker, and when I watched him on tape, I just wasn't that impressed. Like, I think if he's a guy that plays at guard, then like, yeah, I could probably see it, but he is really stiff. When you just watch him move, he just feels like such a rigid athlete. Like even when you watch him like try and mirror guys, he's so upright with his pass set, and it just doesn't look like he sinks very well. He can't mirror very well. And it's tough because he is a powerful run blocker, and that's how he's going to make his money in the NFL. But it's tough to be like a tackle or a guard at the NFL level and not have the flexibility to sink or like move the way that you want to, because you're just stiff. And I actually, when I was watching Jennings Dunker at Iowa, I actually came away more impressed with Logan Jones, their center. And I was like, hey, like Logan Jones might be the better of the Iowa like offensive line prospects this year, because it just doesn't look like it looks like it's going to be a tough like conversion for Dunker from tackle to guard, because he just is stiff.
Yeah, I'm not particularly a fan of Dunker's game. He will not be in my final top 100. I like Logan Jones, but Logan Jones is tiny. I actually think the best Iowa offensive lineman, I think they're still at Iowa. I think Cade Piper, their right guard, to move to center, is going to be a highly drafted guy, even if he's small. And Trevor Locke, their left tackle, I think ends up being a solid top 50-ish tackle prospect when it's all said and done. So my guy was not anything to do with athletic testing. This was Cage Casey, who came from Boise State, left tackle, goes to the Senior Bowl, and I just thought he had the roughest week at the Senior Bowl. I mean, some just tough reps for him there. I don't think he's a tackle in the NFL. And move him inside the guard, I'm not sure necessarily alleviates some of the issues, because he's not particularly strong on tape. So Cage Casey, a guy who I thought could have been a top 100 guy after watching him during the season. But that's kind of why the beauty, I don't know, I hate saying a guy who's going to fall on draft boards, this is the beauty of the Senior Bowl, but like it is it's nice to see these guys against top competition. At Boise State, he faced Notre Dame this past year. Outside of that, not a single other Power 4 school. So, and Notre Dame's not even technically a Power 4 school. So that showed then on tape at the Senior Bowl.
It's tough for him because the play strength is such a concern. Like, he might be a developmental guy where you bring him into an NFL weight room for a year and just see what happens. But in that same vein, like, it's tough for guys being the G5 to NFL when you're supposed to be the like super athlete, and he's not a great athlete in that. He's not super explosive. 801 3-cone, like that's not going to cut it when it comes to developmental prospect with athleticism that you can teach how to play football or get him into the weight room and see if he turns into something. So I definitely agree with you. His Senior Bowl was really rough. It sort of showed, like you said, the lack of play strength at tackle and guard, honestly. Like, it just didn't look like he was comfortable there. So I wonder what his stock is going to look like in this draft cycle, but I don't think he's getting drafted in the first 2 days.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. After that, turn our attention to the defensive side of the football.
You think you understand how this business works, but you don't.
I now know why Mommy was so stressed.
What's the plan here?
Landman. New season now streaming only on Paramount Plus.
All right, DTs. Who we got?
We're doing riser for DTs first, and I'm going with my guy Grayson Halton from Oklahoma. Like, this dude rocks. Like, I saw him at the Senior Bowl, and I was like, man, I kept texting my friends. One of my friends is an Oklahoma beat writer. I'm like, this Halton kid is just crushing it this week. Every day at the Senior Bowl, he was making something happen. And it's in a draft class where there's a lot more bigger one techs than obviously outside of the Peter Woods, Caleb Banks range of DTs. There aren't a lot of true 3 techniques, but Grayson Halton is a true 3 tech, 6'2.5", 293 pounds, but he is explosive, and it shows in his testing. 36.5 vertical jump. He broad jumped really well, and when you watch him move, he is always like, his ability to get upfield is such a plus when it comes to the run game and passing game. I would not be surprised if he's a day 2 guy, an early day 2 guy. I'm sort of hoping that 56 for the Jaguars is where they draft Grayson Halton, because he is perfect for what they want to be as an even front, like attacking defense.
Yeah, I mean, when you test like that, the pre-draft process in a class where very few guys did, you're going to get drafted a lot. You're going to fly off some draft boards. My guy also tested well. I don't think he goes nearly as high as Grayson Halton, but I think he went from a borderline draftable guy to a for sure draftable guy, probably early to mid day 3. It's Caleb Proctor from Southeastern Louisiana. I banged the table to get him at the Shrine Bowl. I thought he rushed the passer better than any other DT at the Shrine Bowl. And then he goes 4.79 in the 40 at 291 pounds. With a 33-inch vertical, 9.5 broad jump. Those are 3 tech numbers, man. Obviously, big-time developmental guy. I don't think you're drafting him with the anticipation that he's going to start anytime soon for you, and not going to play many downs outside of third. But good Lord only made so many guys 290 that run 4.79s, and a lot of them end up being productive pass rushers in the NFL.
So most of my friends were at the Shrine Bowl this year. I was not at the Shrine Bowl, but they kept saying like, hey, Caleb Proctor. Like, this guy is good. And when you go back and watch him play, I watched the LSU game and I'm like, oh, wow. Like, this dude looks like an NFL player. Like that's something that you always want to see for small school guys, is you got to look like an NFL player against the smaller schools. Like, you have to dominate those games. And I think Proctor, like you said, there's not a lot of guys built like him that aren't like at least productive in like limited roles. I think of like for both he and Grayson Holmes, or like a Sheldon Rankin style of player, where like it might not be like a true 3-down guy, but you're always constantly productive in your role. And that's something that Proctor, because of his athleticism and ability to rush the passer, he's going to find a role for himself. And that's what gets you drafted, is especially on day 3, you have the athleticism and you have a defined role.
All right, let's move to edge position. Who we got?
I have Illinois' Gabe Akis, and he's a guy where I just love the profile. I've said like this is a culture guy. Like he is a guy that's gonna immediately improve like your locker room. Two-time state champion wrestler in the state of Florida at 285, was playing at 285 at Illinois, slimmed down to 270 and even got down to 260 for the combine process. He looked a lot more explosive in his final season at Illinois than other seasons. But for me, when it comes to his ranking between like that second tier of edge rushers, the power guys, between Zion Young, TJ Parker, that group, Derek Moore, I'll even throw in there. I think Akas's pass rush plan might be more developed and his hand usage is the most developed out of all those guys. Like he's actually trying different things. Now with Akas, he's not going to be super bendy. That's not his game. He doesn't try to be super bendy. But for a guy that's going to play mean as hell in the run game, he's going to give you speed to power or power to power in Akas's standpoint. I think that's going to be a guy that gets drafted early day 2. I'd be surprised but not stunned if like Mike Vrabel at 31 is like, you know what, that's my kind of guy. That's the guy that we want in this locker room. So I just think he's been a really big winner of this pre-draft process.
And having shed that weight, he still did 30 bench press reps. He's not tested yet. Had a hamstring, but I believe this one is a real hamstring because he will be testing tomorrow, actually, Thursday, April 2nd, an alternate pro day for him. He'll be putting up numbers there. We'll see what they are. But I'm in agreement. I think with edge rushers in particular, I either want to see a guy who has one crazy dominant way to win, someone who, can consistently go speed to power or consistently be a speed rusher to the edge. I want one crazy dominant way to win, or a guy who has shown he can win in a number of different ways. And when you watch Akas, compared to all those guys, like you said, the day 2 edge rushers this draft class, he has the most variety of ways he wins on tape. Did that at Senior Bowl. For that reason, he is going to be the front of the line for them on my draft board. All right, my guy's Malachi Lawrence, who I think I saw Dane Brugler say he's going top 25 in this year's draft after his pre-draft process. I am not that high on him. I thought I was a little crazy having him in my initial top 50 draft board. I thought I was like a big-time outlier. Turns out the NFL is now even higher on him than I am, but with good reason. He ran a 4.52. He has a 40-inch vertical, a 10-10 broad jump. I said you have to have one crazy high-end way to win. Well, that's how you win as a speed rusher in the NFL. And I think the biggest worry with him is just plan. More often than not, whether it's run game, pass rushing, he kind of just seems to be freestyling it. And you see a lot of dud reps on his tape, but he crushed it at the Shrine Bowl, crushed it at the Combine. Would not surprise me if he ends up now a first-round pick.
He also has near 34-inch arms and is a long player. Like his length and fluidity as a pass rusher really stood out to me. He was a guy I watched pre-Combine. I was like, oh, wow, where have I been on this guy? But for me, what stands out with him as a pass rusher is the closing speed, like the closing burst. That's where you're a finisher as a pass rusher. There are a lot of guys who get a lot of pressures but can't finish in the sacks. Malachi Lawrence is like, if he gets shut down, like he's gonna get shut down. His play strength is not to the point where you can have him be like an every down player, especially in the run game. Like you said, he sort of freelances a little bit, but when he rushes the passer, his finishing ability is really good, like NFL caliber. And I think as a designated pass rusher, I think he's going to get drafted really high because he offers that length, size, and fluidity that a lot of teams are looking for. And in a draft class where there aren't many like prototypical size edge rushers with that pass rush potential.
And he had some games down the stretch against some good competition. It was the Baylor game, the Texas Tech game, the BYU game, where it's just like, whoa, like those are some reps that's what it's supposed to look like. All right, linebacker. A lot of options here. A lot of guys look awesome in the pre-draft process as a linebacker, but who are you going with?
If you were a linebacker in this pre-draft process, you probably could be a winner.
Yeah.
But I'm going with a guy that I watched on tape and was like, oh, wow, like I think this guy rocks. It's Keyshawn Elliott from Arizona State. I think this dude rules. Like his ability to get off of blocks, his hand usage when it comes to the run game. He's able to keep himself clean as a run defender. And then he shows a lot of promise as a blitzer. And I think that at the NFL level, if you're going to be on the field on third down as a linebacker, you either have to be great in coverage or you have to be a great blitzer. And I think Keyshawn Elliott can be a really great blitzer. I think he and Josiah Trotter are very similar. And those are the guys where, like, if you could group this linebacker class into buckets in terms of how they're going to win on third down, Trotter and Elliott are in the third down blitz, like havoc guys that you want on the field. Like, I think he did a lot of really nice stuff when it came to, like I said, getting off blocks as a pass rusher. And because of all that stuff, I don't think he's going to be like an early day 2 pick. I could see him more being like a round 3 guy, but he's the guy I've been really impressed with. Every time I go back and watch somebody against Arizona State's defense, I was like, oh, 44 is making plays. So I was really impressed with him.
And he's one of the guys that I just keep saying it's a deep linebacker class. Like you said, he might fall to day 3 and he could probably start right away for you in a role at least. It's a crazy deep. And he had 38-inch vertical, 10.5 broad jump at 231 pounds. That's, yeah, you could throw a dart and hit a linebacker who at least raised their draft stock a little. I'm not sure if anyone raised their draft stock more than Kyle Lewis, the Pittsburgh linebacker, because he went from interesting player at Pittsburgh who plays the overhang role there. You know, it's kind of a slot-ish role that doesn't really exist in the NFL the way it does in college with the wide hashes. And he dominated the Senior Bowl in coverage. He ran a 4.53 at the combine, 39.5-inch vertical, 10.9 broad jump. And what I love is that not only is he crazy athletic, he actually has a really good frame to play linebacker. He has 32-inch arms is what he measured in at the Senior Bowl. So short, but not unable to affect passes still. That helps with leverage, and that helps in coverage. I think this guy's going to be a special coverage player, and I could see him going top 50 after this.
I love watching Kyle Lewis in pass coverage. Like, it's a guy that has the instincts and awareness of a safety, and that's why they play him at overhang to be sort of their equalizer against a lot of spread teams. But the stuff that he did in coverage, there was a play against Stanford where Sam Roush is actually running a wheel route, and Lewis recognizes it late, but still gets around to it and catches the interception. That's rare stuff for a linebacker. And I think, like, when you think about undersized linebackers like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, I think that's a very similar style of player. And Kyle Lewis actually said he watches a lot of JOK's film because they play very similarly. I think he's a guy where, like you said, he's had a great pre-draft process. His Senior Bowl was awesome, especially on his final day. He was everywhere. So he's had a great process. I think he's got to answer some questions about where he plays at the NFL level. But, man, I think you just play him at will in a 4-down, like even front defense, and just let him roam.
All right, let's get to cornerback. Who we got?
So I could have went with a lot of people at cornerback, and I want to give a shout out to Amari Harvey from Georgia Tech, a guy that I found late. But I'm gonna go with Jaden Kennedy from Oregon, who is another guy where, like, you watch him in Oregon's like loaded defense, and you're like, oh wow, that guy keeps making plays. He's a little bit on the smaller side for a corner. He's probably gonna play nickel at the NFL level, but he has safety versatility, and he gives maximum effort. Like, that guy does not like being blocked, especially in the run game and the screen game. He's going to try and make a lot of plays. He's more than willing as a tackler, but I think his ability to stay attached and the closing speed that he has, I think that's going to play, especially when you come from Oregon's defense that's produced a lot of NFL talent, plays a lot of NFL-style defenses. They play a lot of man coverage at Oregon. So I like the guy. I think he could be a starting nickel at the NFL level. I'm just curious with a lot of nickels in this draft class between D'Angelo Pons, Chandler Rivers. We haven't even talked about all of the safety, like, nickel conversions. Like, there are a lot of nickels in this draft class. Kennedy could be sort of like the underrated guy in this class who goes day 2 and starts immediately.
If I were building an NFL team, I don't know if I would take any corners in the first round. Not say that, like, this class, I'm actually going to have some corners really high on my board. But I would just want a room full of 5 guys like a Jaden Kennedy. Like Jacob Harris was last year. I just want 5 guys who fight their butt off, are going to hit like bricks, who are just like tough, hard-nosed DBs. That's just what I want in my room. I think in today's NFL, that is what basically back seven defense is more often than not than pure coverability. So I'm going to love guys like that. But speaking of pure coverability, the one who, in my opinion, I think rose the biggest on my draft board, or just rose the most in my mind in terms of how good I feel about him as a prospect, is Chris Johnson from San Diego State. I thought he had the best Senior Bowl of any of the corners there. That's obviously a tough situation to look good in. Then he goes to the combine, and I think athleticism was maybe my biggest question. I never really viewed him as a great athlete. He goes 4.4, 38-inch vertical, 10.6 broad jump. Those are just like very good all-around numbers. And what I love is super low cut. He has the shortest legs and longest torso of any corner in this draft class. And talk to anyone on a football field, and they will say that is the combo you want, because you're low center of gravity, but you can touch. You have a long reach when you have a long torso. It kind of extends your lever arm to get to guys. So for that reason, Chris Johnson, big riser for me.
I love Chris Johnson's game. One of my favorite things about Chris Johnson, and it's going to be really, really nerdy. He is an awesome special teams player. He is going to immediately raise the floor as a special teams gunner. Like that guy, he is constantly making plays as a tackler. I think he's one of the better tackling corners in this draft class. And the thing that worried me the most with him was the closing speed, the ability to close that space and the long speed that he had. But like you said, ran 4.4, explosive mover, explosive jumper. But his awareness and eyes and zone coverage, I think he's a perfect zone corner. And like you can just see like him being a really good, like a cloud corner, someone you want to force the ball to. Mm-hmm. And because a lot of NFL teams are running duo to try and attack corners in the run game, he's a guy you can put on the field and not feel bad about having him there, because he is a willing tackler. He's also going to play physically up in guys' faces.
The only problem, most boring name in the draft. Look up Chris Johnson. Unlike I go to PFF, look up Chris Johnson. There's like 100 dudes who were named Chris Johnson at the collegiate level of the past decade. So that always works against you. Get a nickname.
Also, unfortunately, like the name of one of the best running backs in the NFL, like in modern history.
So his SEO is terrible. He needs better SEO. Get a nickname, Chris. All right, next one. Safety. Who we got?
You know where we're going with this. This Traden Stukes, safety from Arizona. I love this guy. I was preparing for the Senior Bowl, hoping he'd show up, and I was trying to watch Genesis Smith. But every time I watch Arizona, number 2 for Arizona, making plays as a safety on post hash versatility, the range that he has as a nickel. There's a play that he has against BYU. I think I actually clipped it on Twitter, where they're trying to run sail, and the slot receivers run that sail route, and Stukes gets under it and sort of like turns with him and catches the interception. There's a play he has against Arizona State as a post safety where he jumps over the guy to make an interception. He has the best ball skills of any safety in this draft class. And then he also ran a 4.33 40, explosive jumper. And the only issue for him, like I also love his story as a walk-on for Arizona, stayed a long time at Arizona, got to a third-team All-America for Arizona, but torn ACL 2024, didn't run another 40 at the combine because he tweaked his hamstring. The thin frame and injuries sort of worry me, but this dude, when it comes to a modern NFL defense, is a guy that you want on the field.
Yeah, we were both big fans of Traden Stukes, and that combine he had was stupidly good. Speaking of stupidly good combine, Dylan Thieneman's my guy. 4.34, 41-inch vertical, 10.5 broad jump. I'm not like super high on Dylan Thieneman either, but because I do think his role is not necessarily the most valuable of roles in today's NFL. The deep safety is not the guy that I would necessarily take in the first round, but I think he's going to be damn good at just that. And I think he is super rangy, and it showed at the combine. 4.35 is a lightning quick time, and the guy's got good ball skills. He's been super productive on the football over the course of his career. I wouldn't take him in the first round, but I bet he does go in the first round after this.
I agree with you. I wouldn't take him first round. I do think he's not that great in man coverage because I think there's some stiffness in his hips, but his footwork is so good. And I think the explosiveness, like you said, it shows up both at Purdue and at Oregon, where Purdue had him more as a center field safety. And if you're wondering like where the 4-3-5 came from, if you watch Purdue, Dylan Thieneman, that's exactly what he did at Purdue. He made a lot of plays going hash to hash as a single like center field safety. Oregon, they asked him to do a little bit more split field stuff. I think he's a really good tackler from depth, but that athleticism, I think that is he's a great, like, he's a post safety in the NFL. I don't think you want to try and play him at nickel. I don't think you want to try and have him matching with slot receivers. I think he got mixed up a little bit by Mekhi Lemon when they played USC. But when it comes to his role, like you said, he is arguably the best in his class at his role as a center field safety.
All right, that is our risers. Take a quick break after that, get to our ballers to cap it off here.
This isn't just combat. It's cinema.
Are you not entertained?
The new home of UFC, Paramount Plus.
All right, DTs. Who we got, JP?
Again, this is a guy that I think is still going to go round 1, but he has fallen from surefire top 10 to, I don't know, like towards the back end of round 1. And it's Peter Woods from Clemson. And I think if you watch 2024 Peter Woods, that is a surefire top 10 pick. But what happened between 2024 and 2025, nobody really knows. Like what happened? I think they tried to slim him down and he played nose tackle, which is not what he's going to do at the NFL level. But he also measured in really small. He has sub 32-inch arms. He's at 31.25 arm length, 76 3/4 wingspan. Those are both, arm length is 5th percentile for defensive tackles according to Mock Draftable. The wingspan is 12th percentile. Like he's just he doesn't win with length. And that's not going to be his game. He wins with quickness and he wins with power. But, with all of the concerns about him being locked in at Clemson, was this season at Clemson sort of just like you get out of the first game and you're like, I'm good. Like, we're just going to sit and like rest on our draft stock. Like, what happened? He's going to have to answer a lot of questions about what happened between now and then.
He also did what I would call something I don't think I've ever seen before. He did a 10 at his pro day. He didn't do a 40. He did just a 10. Did you see this?
No, wait, what? This is awesome.
He only did a 10 split. He stopped after 10 yards for his pro day because he said he had been dealing with a hamstring issue and didn't want to tweak it. So he only did the start and apparently did a 1.67 on the start, but he did not do a full pro day, which is hilarious.
I think that rocks.
So which actually raised him up my board. I was like, dude, just doing a 10 and kind of putting up a sick 10 split. A 1.67 is a really good time.
Yeah.
For a 300-pound DT. So I'm in agreement, though. That is a really small frame. His tape was really inconsistent this past year. I am high on him, but I am nowhere near as high on him as I was heading into the season. I thought this guy looked like a lock top 5 pick as a sophomore. That didn't come to fruition. He could fall to the late teens, mid-20s. Would not surprise me whatsoever. I'm still buying just because there's so few guys that have his level of juice.
Yeah.
But I do not feel confident. I don't feel confident about a lot of guys in this draft class, though, at the premium positions. Speaking of a guy I don't feel confident in, Caleb Banks, I think hard to have a tougher pre-draft process. I don't think he looked great at the Senior Bowl. And then he literally, the one question with him is injuries. Can he stay on a football field? Was hurt all last season, barely played over the course of his career. And he just gets hurt at the combine, a foot injury. And that's especially concerning because he's 330 and he's the kind of 330 where he ain't getting to 315. He's not a super fat 330. This guy is just a large, enormous human being, and lower extremities, if they're already collapsing under the stress of what's being put on them, I don't know if that's really going to get fixed over the course of his NFL career. And the fact that it just happens working out, like running around. Yeah, I think he falls precipitously. I don't think he's a first rounder anymore. I think could even fall outside of the second round at this point. This is
his second foot injury. That's the second time like he's been kept out of stuff. But the spin zone is he ran a 5.05 on a broken foot. Like, hey, I'll take that. Like at 6'6", 330, the injuries are going to be the biggest thing for him. And it's tough because Peter Woods and Caleb Banks are the two top defensive tackles in this draft class, and they're both considered fallers for us. But Banks is a guy that I love. Even when he came back from injury this year, he looked the part. But the biggest thing for him is the injury, and he misses a lot of tackles. Like he doesn't finish plays.
Yes.
And it's tough because he's such a big guy with 35-inch arms. You shouldn't miss as many tackles as you do, especially on the interior. But it's just concerning for him with all of the injuries, like how far that's going to drop him. I mean, if I'm the Jaguars at 56 and Caleb Banks is there, I don't think they should hesitate. But it's tough because, like, how many games are you going to get out of him?
To anyone who thinks that, like, missed tackles can be, especially for a DT, they can be kind of finicky, right? Of course, they're not going to tackle running backs every time, right? They're much worse athletes. Derek Brown missed 5 of 138 tackle attempts his entire collegiate career. Sometimes guys just got it, right? Sometimes guys just have it.
That's insane.
Yeah. So yeah, Caleb Banks on the flip side, he missed 13 out of 41. So a little bit different sort of prospect there. All right, edge, who are we going with?
We're sticking with Clemson here, and I'm going with TJ Parker. And Parker's a guy that I wanted to believe in, especially preseason. I thought he had a great 2024. But for me, TJ Parker feels a little bit like a one-trick pony, where he has the long arm, and that's how he wins. If he's not winning with the long arm, he's not winning. Like he's just okay at multiple things. And I think he's very similar to a guy like George Karlaftis from and this is not a comparison like what he's going to be at the NFL level, but stylistically, like for a guy that wins with the long arm, wins with power, converting speed to power, they're very similar. But George Karlaftis was much more explosive than TJ Parker. And that's where you sort of worry is how explosive can you be at the NFL level if you're always going to try and long arm people? Because if you're not converting speed to power and you're not going power to power, guys, you're not just overwhelming like brute force tackles. Like, what are we doing here? Is he going to be a cleanup guy? I don't think you draft a cleanup guy in the first round. So it's tough because I think he rebounded a little bit at the Senior Bowl. I don't think he was like dominant at the Senior Bowl, but I do think he has lost a lot of money between 20 and 25 and right now. And he's another guy where you sort of got to ask, like, what happened this season?
Yep. And what I always say with power rushers, I think that's where TJ Parker would fit in, is that you better overpower collegiate offensive tackles consistently. Like if you think you're going to power rush at the NFL level, we better see it like every time in college, right? You either better do it on tape or you better have the numbers that look like you can do it in the NFL. It better be like a 4.5 something. It better be a good vertical. You better have numbers. And 4.68, 34-inch vertical, 10-foot broad jump, fine, just okay. And I think that's how I feel about TJ Parker. He'll be a fine defensive end in the NFL. Where do you draft that? We'll see how the NFL values it. All right, my guy's Cassius Howell. And it's, nothing changed, but he has 30 and a quarter inch arms. Putting a number to it, unfortunately, that's going to follow him forever. And who wants to be the team that drafted a guy in the first round with 30 and a quarter inch arms? I just don't know if anyone will. It's historically short. NFL teams hate outliers. And so for that reason, I unfortunately just think he falls a little bit, even if I think he's going to be a good pass rusher. The guy knows how to rush the passer. That to me matters more at the end of the day, but it just comes down to valuation, and it probably is a mid-second valuation at this point.
I think with Howell, it's tough because I'd say he's the best finisher and best flattener at the edge position in this draft class. We talked about Malachi Lawrence, his ability to finish plays. Cassius Howell is a finisher as a pass rusher. It's almost eerily similar to Nick Herbig and Alex Highsmith. And like, if they're not like getting the pressure immediately, like they can still finish, they can still flatten really well. Cassius Howell flattens really well, but he's also another one of those guys you said with Chris Johnson, like he's got a really low torso. Cassius Howell's sort of a weird mover to me, sort of herky-jerky in how he moves. It's very mechanical because he's getting all his cleats into the ground multiple times. He's not a very like high cut player, so he's getting his feet into the ground multiple times. But again, 30.25-inch arms, that is the second lowest mock draftable has seen in their database.
I think it's 2000.
It's like, yeah, like, so it's tough to be a first round edge rusher with historically short arms if you can't win in other ways. And I still think Howell can be a productive edge rusher, but how high do you draft a guy who might only be a third down player?
That is the question, and we'll see. I still like him. I think he can get it done. The guy knows how to do it. He's done in the SEC. You get 11.5 sacks in the SEC nowadays, I believe. All right, linebacker.
I went with Harold Perkins here, and Harold Perkins feels similar to Kyle Lewis, but I feel like Harold Perkins is more of a man without a home than Kyle Lewis. Kyle Lewis is a linebacker. I don't know if Harold Perkins is a linebacker. He's played so many different positions at LSU, moved from edge to Mike, from Mike to Will, from Will to overhang. And I think his best stuff was at edge, but at 6'1", 220 pounds, like, you're not going to play that guy as an edge defender full time. I mean, Hassan Reddick is like probably the only thing that comes close to Harold Perkins size-wise, and even then, he was like 235. Harold Perkins is like 223. So he is an off-ball linebacker, but I just think his instincts are so far behind as an off-ball linebacker, and he also isn't a great coverage guy. So you can't really play him as like an overhang. So he truly is, like, when we talk about positionless versus versatile, Harold Perkins is positionless, and I don't know what you do with a guy that is a great athlete, but what do you play? Where do you play him?
God, man, he was so good as a freshman.
Harold Perkins was awesome as a freshman.
I know it's easier said than done, but like, I would have told that guy, get on the. Why do I always blank on who's the guy who had the Cody Mock diet, right? Get on the diet where you're putting in 10,000 calories a day and just get up. And I know he doesn't have the frame, right, of a traditional edge rusher, but like, there's a lot of guys in this class who don't have the frame of traditional edge rushers that'll probably go day two. He had so much natural pass rushing ability that even if he got to be 235 at 6'1", that range, I think he would have been drafted way higher than he'll be drafted right now. And if I'm drafting him, that's what I'm going to try to get him to do. I'm going to try to get him to get back to be a pass rusher, because that was clearly where he was the most impressive.
Yeah, he's more of a, like, you want him like mugged up. You want him as a blitzer. Like, he's at his best moving downhill, but that's sort of like you're a specialist at that point. So you just wonder, like, what defense would fit him best.
Yeah. All right, my guy, I don't want to crush him too hard because he wasn't super high. Probably wasn't a top 100 guy for really anyone at this point. Lander Barton, the Utah linebacker. And this is how good every linebacker tested, right? And how good every linebacker looked this pre-draft process. But he went 4.79 with a 33-inch vertical and a 9.11 broad jump at his pro day. That's just a guy who early in his career I thought was going to be a good athlete. He's at least a smooth athlete. He may be a late day 3 guy if undrafted at this point, unfortunately. So we don't have to kill him too much. All right, let's get to cornerback.
Cornerback, I went with Malik Muhammad from Texas. He's a guy that sort of was in a lot of preseason cycles is like one of the top corners in this draft class. But I just I don't see it with Malik Muhammad, and I'm not going to crush the guy too much, but I just think he's undersized, and he also is a little grabby and thin. So it's just like, okay, you're thin, small, and you grab a lot. I think you're probably going to be a nickel, but I also don't really like some of his stuff tackling. So it's hard to find a position for Malik Muhammad, even though he has the pedigree, he has the speed to be an NFL like nickel, but like, it's tough to have a guy out there when he's a penalty. He's a walking penalty.
Yeah, I just don't think his game is super NFL translatable, unfortunately. at this point in time. Like you said, he's not a guy who's going to be a good tackler. He's not going to come up in the running game. That's a vast majority of corner play nowadays. And then is he good enough as a pure man guy to get by in a scheme like that? I don't think so either. So he's kind of just a tweener that may never break into a starting lineup. My guy, and another one I don't want to crush too much, but TJ Hall from Iowa, who has fans. I think he was productive this past year. I was never quite one of them. And then he goes and tests and had probably the worst testing numbers of any corner, like any touted corner in this pre-draft process. Didn't look great at the Senior Bowl. 6'1", 189. You're in a 4.59 with a 7.19 3 cone. So those numbers going to have a tough time getting drafted. All right, safety. We're kind of it's a good news for this defensive class, I think, in my opinion, that we're not talking about a lot of top guys outside of defensive line. I think the back seven of this class, a lot of good testers, not a lot of guys who really came and showed in duds. Because your guy wasn't a top 100 guy on tape, but obviously you have him here.
Yeah, Will and Xavier Wampa here from Iowa, and he was a guy going into this season I sort of expected more out of, because he was a guy I was high on finishing the 2024 season. I thought he would enter the draft in 2024 rather than 2025, but he just, even though he ran 4.48, he doesn't play like a 4.48. And that's where you sort of worry, where like when you go and watch a guy after he runs well, it's the cautionary tale of the 40-yard dash. It is, okay, this guy runs fast, but does he play fast? And I just don't think he plays fast. And on top of that, he doesn't really have the ball skills to be like a true like starting safety in the NFL. He had 3 interceptions over the course of his career, 4 pass deflections. You don't really see a lot of the production that you would want from a safety in a really loaded safety class. So I feel like he's going to be a little bit further. He's going to be further down the board just because the safety class is really good, but it's tough for him because he just needs to find a specific role for him.
And he was, if not a 5-star, I think he was the #1 safety recruit in his class. I was right there with you. I expected more from him, but he got benched at times throughout his Iowa career. And Iowa, obviously, not to say it's a hard defense, but like it's a defense that is more based off of, it's more of a cerebral defense because it's truly just like all zone coverage. Like it's all zone what they're doing. So like a guy who's physically impressive may not necessarily thrive in it. My guy, Zakee Wheatley from Penn State. Again, not a lot of safeties tested particularly poorly. Unfortunately for Wheatley, 4.6 240 at a pro day was his number, 33-inch vertical. He's still got a really long wingspan. I think he could still be a good box safety, but I think he's just going to kind of thought he could be a day 2 safety. I bet he falls to the back end of the day 2 pack if falls out of the day 2 mix altogether here.
He's a guy where a lot of people like him, and I watched him and I just couldn't really get into that much because he is a box safety. That is what he does at his best. But he also sort of he plays really out of control at times, where like it feels like he's so excited to come up into the box and make a tackle that he just goes flying past the ball carrier. Like it's like sometimes when we talk about like when a dog has the zoomies, like it feels like Zakee Wheatley has the zoomies at times when you watch him, and it's just like slow down. Like it's right there. You don't have to go flying in to make the tackle, but I also think he might be a little thin. Like he's just had a lot of questions on top of the 4.6 40, where it's like, man, what do you do with a box safety who sometimes is out of control and also like doesn't really have the ball production? So he might be a guy where, like you said, more late day 2, there's definitely a defense for him because he has that urgency and he plays with a sense of urgency, but it's going to be tough for him to find like a true starting role.
Yeah, that's kind of where I ended up with him. I'm just like, what does this look like in the NFL? And I kept kind of drawing a blank of exactly, dime linebacker. It's like that was kind of what I came to. And that's, again, very limited sort of role. All right. That's our show. Risers and fallers ahead of the 2026 NFL draft. We are 23 days away. Cannot wait. Until next time, keep pushing.